My way of writing is not originating in theory. I'm trying to find the best way of telling a story. That's all I'm doing. These books come to me. I don't go looking for them. They come and find me. At the heart of my project was, first of all, to try and make sense of the world I came from, which was South Asia, what it was to have grown up there and what had happened in that world, in the sense of, I was born just before the independence of India and Pakistan, and so my generation was that first independent generation, and I wanted to make some sense of that. It seemed to me that the way India had been written about in English literature was very British, whereas India is sort of huge and messy and turbulent and overcrowded and smelly. And so, how would you find a language that was like that, is what I asked myself. Not the very clean language of someone like E.M. Forster in Passage to India, but the language which represented the crowd and the reality of the place. And for a couple of books, that's what I was doing. But then I thought, okay, but now I don't live there. I live in the West, and my books have to make that movement too. And so my books have become, in part, they've been books about migration. Because I've been twice over a migrant. I've been a migrant from India to the UK, and then from the UK to America. Or I prefer to think of it as cities, really, because I think I have more loyalty to cities than to countries. So it's like I moved from Bombay to London and from London to New York. That's much closer to how I understand what I did. I sometimes think that the journey from a small Midwestern town to Manhattan is probably a bigger journey than the journey from Bombay to Manhattan, because it requires a much larger shift in behavior and attitude and understanding. So I've always thought of myself as being a writer of the big city, essentially. And then, so in this book, I actually challenged myself to not just be that. Because in the previous novel, The Golden House, the novel almost never leaves Manhattan Island, except for a brief visit to Bombay. It's more or less entirely, in the 212 area code. And when I finished it, I remember saying to myself, okay, next time you have to leave town. You can't just go on in your little comfort zone. If you're not setting yourself challenges, why bother? In the second half of Don Quixote, the characters become aware of the fact that they're in books, and they even have strong opinions about the books they're in, And that this is what now would be called metafiction or postmodernism, etc. And there he was doing it as a contemporary of Shakespeare's. Since I found that I had the second storyline that arrived in my book, which is about the writer who's writing the first storyline, that, Cervantes was there before me. He had already written a book about writing a book. One of the things that happened when I started thinking about my variation on the theme, was that the two main characters of Quixote and his sidekick, really changed. Cervantes' character is melancholy. He's known as the Knight of the Dolorous Countenance. He's got a sad face. My character wanted to be absurdly cheerful, and optimistic and hopeful. And that's what I held on to, because I thought how interesting to have a character who is absolutely filled with hope and to project that character against America as it now is, and may not be the most hopeful moment in the history of America. Once I had my characters, I was free of the model. And I didn't want my book to go on the same kind of journey as they go on. I wanted to go on my journey, So once I had the starting point, I went off in my own direction. Had I been stuck with the archetype, it would have been tough, and would have probably have been awkward and kind of creaky, because I love Don Quixote, but he's 400 years ago. There's a lot of people these days saying satire is dead because the world is more weird than anything you can make up. I know what they mean, because the world, it is more weird than anything you can make up. And if I tried to write a story about an American president who thought the way to handle a hurricane was to bomb it with a nuclear bomb, it would not get published, probably, because it would be seen to be too implausible. That actually there's always a place for using laughter to try and get to the truth of what's going on. If I turn on television at night and I see Stephen Colbert or Samantha Bee or somebody talking about the day's craziness, I'm grateful to them because I sometimes feel that their use of comedy actually allows them to cut deeper. And I mean, I'm not sure if what I do is completely satire. I think there are obviously elements of satire, but I think the thing for me that makes it possible is that I always see through the characters. I mean, I'm not preaching at you. I'm talking about a character living in this world and how they experience it. Once I've made a character, I'm their prisoner. I can't make them do what they don't want to do because it would break the character. Once I know who they are and how they think, then I'm just inhabiting them.